In this video, I'm going to be explaining how I manifested my husband, who is very masculine, a provider, and very protective of me by learning how to balance my masculine and feminine energy. If you are currently trying to manifest your husband, you are definitely going to want to listen to this one. Hi, my name is Amanda Abeo. Welcome to this channel where we talk about how to manifest what you want in life without all the extra stress, chaos, and drama that most people are accustomed to. We talk about manifesting, law of assumption. Lately, we're on a kick about how to manifest your husband because you guys are loving it. We're talking a lot about masculine and feminine energy lately, because again, you guys are loving it. So if that's something that you're interested in, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we have coming out on this channel. And below this video, you will find a bunch of free resources like our free manifestation guide, and you'll also find all our available courses and programs and how to work with us to go deeper into some of these concepts. So let's get into it. I've done a lot of videos on this channel about how I manifested my husband. In fact, I recently did one on how I manifested my husband by healing my wounded feminine energy, which you guys are eating up. You guys are really enjoying that one. This one's going to kind of be a part 2 to that one. So if you haven't watched that one, make sure that you do, because it's going to give this one a lot more context. So give you a little bit of backstory about who I am and how this all ended up happening. I am a naturally very feminine woman. Most women are, but I was raised in the West. I was raised in the United States. So I am Latina. I come from a more traditional culture, although that is changing. But I do come from a more traditional culture and background, but I was raised in the United States. So that obviously caused a lot of confusion because coming from a more traditional background, and then the United States tends to be more, let's say, modern and postmodern when it comes to how they view relationships between men and women. That obviously caused some confusion. And then in addition to that, I come from a long line of very controlling women on both sides. By the way, I saw wounded feminine just in different ways. And when I started looking into my ancestry and all that kind of stuff through trainings that I was doing here in Mexico, I realized that at least 3 generations back on each side, the women were in full-on survival mode. So I come along, I'm extremely feminine. I'm not dealing with the intense survival stuff that they did. They were in survival mode for good reason, but they basically taught me to be in survival mode and always be in control, and that men could not be trusted. The world is a super dangerous place. You have to be in control. Your life is going to be harder because you are a woman. And even though I had very natural feminine qualities, as most little girls do, most of that was conditioned out of me because the women in my family were very masculine. And so I spent, I don't know, from like early 20s until like early 30s, really going after my career and going after money because A, I thought that's what was going to keep me safe in a scary world. B, I didn't trust men because I was taught not to trust men. So it was that whole sort of like, you better make your own money, you know, because men can fail you, blah, 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 they're useless, blah, 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 you know, the typical stories that we get. I was also avoiding intimacy in relationships altogether because, of course, as I started dating and being in relationships, what would I manifest? Exactly what I believed. What did I believe? Exactly what I was taught. So then it was like a loop and a vicious cycle when it came to that. So it was a way to protect myself from intimacy and experiencing relationships that I thought were going to be a disaster anyway. What I didn't realize, that I realize now, is by the time I got to like 32, 33 years old, I had a breakdown, basically. My business started breaking down, my body was breaking down, my mind was breaking down. I didn't understand what was going on. And I ended up working with an expert in neuroscience because one of the things that I've always been really good about is investing in myself and my own personal growth. I never saw anybody in my family do that, but I was interested in that, and I was always very interested by how humans work and how they operate and why they make the decisions that they do ever since I was a kid. I would just kind of like be the observer and be like, why do they do that, right? So I've always been into personal growth, personal development, end up working with an expert in neuroscience. When I end up working with that expert in neuroscience, it would blast my whole world wide open, turn my world upside down, because I would come to realize that my nervous system was actually completely dysregulated, and it had been for many years. In retrospect, that makes complete sense because I was experiencing physical and emotional symptoms of a dysregulated nervous system actually for many years. I had tons of hormonal issues in my 20s, which comes from, dysregulated nervous system, cutting off your feminine energy, so on and so forth. So it actually checked out in retrospect. And I would come to learn that a lot of it was just conditioning. I was reliving a lot of the trauma that my family had experienced prior to me being around. Very controlling women in my family, which would then dictate everything else, the whole energy of the family, which was not harmonious, for lack of a better term. We'll just put it that way. There's narcissism in my family, a couple generations back for sure. So I would start discovering all this stuff, and I would start to realize that my whole life had basically been built on a lie, that femininity is not safe is a lie, that men are not safe is a lie, that men cannot be trusted and they're useless is a lie, that you must protect yourself at all costs and be hard on the outside, also a lie. So I'm going through that process, right? And I'm here thinking, I'm learning all this so I can go make more money in my business. And what ended up happening was that was not my true desire at all. I didn't care about the money. My true desire was I'm ready to be in partnership, and I want to be in partnership with a masculine man, and I want to be more authentic to who I am. And that was a far more feminine woman than what I had been conditioned to be. The reason why I'm sharing that story is because for you high-performing, high-achieving, hyper-independent women, that might be a familiar story to you. You may have had the women in your family, because they were trying to protect you, tell you men are useless, right? Particularly if you grew up in the West. I'm starting to realize that, for example, here in Mexico, when we have these conversations with women's circles and things like that, it's a little bit more of a half and half, because again, it tends to be a more traditional culture, so there's other issues that go on in that regard. So I'm seeing it's got a little bit more of a half and half, but when I'm with like American friends, it's like men are useless, they're terrible, they're pieces of shit. Like that's the typical, I'm raising him. That's like the typical conversation that you hear more in the women's circle. Oh, he's a narcissist. So that's the other one that pops up a lot. He's a narcissist. Everyone's a narcissist now. Most people don't even know what that means or what the markers are of narcissism. But everyone's a narcissist. And true narcissism, right? Not like, oh, that person thinks highly of themselves. Like, no, that person is completely manipulative and has zero self-awareness. There's a difference. So it's interesting, right? Because my husband and I were raised in the United States. We both come from more traditional cultures. Me, Latin culture, him, Eastern European culture. They both tend to be more traditional and more conservative, but when you're raised in the United States, that throws a whole world of confusion into your world. And then in my case, and also his case, we have actually quite similar stories. People were in survival mode, just complete immigrant survival mode. So in my case, that turned into pretty negative conditioning in terms of my self-esteem, in terms of me needing to feel like I need to prove myself to the women in my family. In terms of getting love in that way by proving myself and being a good person. I also grew up very religious. That threw in a whole other wrench into that situation. So it's very confusing, obviously. And if you're watching this video, you are probably also pretty confused about how all this stuff works, or you wouldn't be watching this. So I wanted to share that story as context, because I know that a lot of women who are watching this are experiencing something like what I experienced, which is like, hey, I did what the women in my family told me to do, and everything is still a mess. Basically, my relationships are a mess. I'm making good money, but it's coming at some very high costs in my life, in my health. I'm having health issues. Like I said, my relationships are a disaster. So If you're watching this, you're probably experiencing some of that. And I want to let you know that the women in your family were just trying to protect you. That's it. But they were in survival mode. They didn't really teach you how to be in your feminine, and they didn't even teach you that femininity is actually a superpower that will keep you safe in a lot of ways and will help you better discern who you should choose as partners, and that will actually make your life easier. Most of us were taught that our lives would be harder because we were women, and the reality is that your life can be easier because you're a woman, but you have to learn how to harness feminine energy and use it in order for that to be true. A lot of you were taught to be hard on the outside and soft on the inside. How's that working for you? Probably not very well. True femininity is soft on the outside, but resilient and strong as hell on the inside, because she's the one who basically has the emotional equilibrium of a household and is the keeper of relationships. So it's about being strong on the inside, not the outside. And most of you, to protect you, were taught the reverse, but that's what men do. Men are the ones who are strong on the outside, right? You were taught to be men, essentially, and it's causing a lot of chaos in a lot of areas of your life. That was my story, but let me also share some other stories that I'm hearing from many of you. In case you don't know my background, I've been coaching people for over 10 years. I've done thousands of hours of coaching with clients. I've trained in a bunch of different modalities in the United States and in Mexico. I've coached in the United States and in Mexico, different languages, different cultures, all that kind of stuff. And there's some interesting things going on out here. So that's my story, but here are some other stories that you might relate to. A lot of you might be in a position where you're married to a man and he's making you work, he's making you pay half the bills, and you're raising kids, and you're doing most of the housework. You are burned out and exhausted. A lot of you are there. A lot of you might be experiencing that you're on the dating scene and you keep attracting men who don't want to take care of you, men who keep asking you, what do you bring to the table, men who keep telling you they want to go 50-50. A lot of you might be in relationships where you feel like the men don't step up and don't do anything and they're imbeciles. Some of you were thinking that. So these are all the experiences that women are having. And the one thing that all those women have in common, they're very masculine. They may not realize it, but they're actually quite masculine. And on the outside, they might be wearing dresses and wearing lipstick and high heels and all that stuff. But on the inside, they're acting like dudes, is essentially what's going on. And masculine men are not attracted to that, period. Now, for those of you who are married already and you're like, oh my God, do I have to divorce my husband? No, you don't. But you do have to shift your energy and you do have to shift the way that you're operating, and then the masculine within him should be activated if he's a masculine guy, and he will start to step up. So how do we start balancing this masculine and feminine energy, and how did I do it to attract my husband? Number one, I had to personally take a step back from work. Now, I'm not saying that all women need to do this. I am seeing it come up a lot. For single women in particular. I was coaching someone in an intensive a few weeks ago, and this very same thing that I went through a few years ago came up. This person was very high achieving, successful career, had done very well, but is running into a bunch of problems in her business. I start asking questions, and I come to find out that she's in the exact position that I was a few years ago, where she was creating a bunch of complications and problems in her business to keep her occupied. Because if she was occupied and solving a bunch of problems in her business, then she wouldn't have to go out on dates. But in reality, what she truly wanted was to start manifesting her masculine provider, protector man. And I said, you may need to, pump the brakes a little bit on business, because you're using your business and creating a bunch of problems as an excuse to not go after your real desire. Right? Some of you are there. Some of you, complete opposite. You need to make money so that you're not looking at a man like an ATM, because he's not an ATM. He's a man. But that's a conversation for another time, because it is a nuanced conversation. So for some of you, you may need to chill out in the work. If you're watching this, you're probably high achieving and high performing. You're going to need to learn how to relax and chill out. And maybe work is not your number one priority anymore. And that's okay. That's totally fine. Now, when I say that, and I understand because I went through it, and this is where it's very helpful to have support like I did, and I can support you, so find the information below. What's going to happen if you're a high achieving, high performing, hyper independent woman and you start taking a step back from work, all your stuff around safety and security is going to start coming up. Because up until this point, you were taught that safety and security comes from achievement and money. So if you take a step back from chasing achievement and money, then who's going to take care of you? Who's going to take care of the bills? How is money going to come in? These are very real fears. And I want you to know that this is a part of the process sometimes, because you have to get good with internal safety, regardless of whether there is money or not. Regardless of what is going on outside of you, you need to start learning how to feel safe on the inside. When you start feeling safe on the inside, that's actually when you start making better decisions in terms of the partners that you're picking. That's actually when you start making better decisions in business as well. All that stuff is going to come up and it's going to get messy, right? Because if you want this new life, which is a more feminine journey, you're going to have to give up your old life. That old life is not coming with you. So you're going to have to be okay with giving some parts of it up. And for some of you, it's going to be taking, pumping the brakes on achievement and working and all that kind of stuff. And that pumping of the brakes is going to bring up all your stuff. And this stuff is coming up for you to work through it, right? So what helped me when I was going through that, because boy, did I experience that. Ooh, it was nasty. The way that I was experiencing it. Like suddenly my business exploded, all kinds of problems, all things, all the fires, everything all happened at once because I couldn't take my old life with me. And what helped me in that moment was, number one, learning how to regulate my nervous system so that I would feel safe no matter what. And number two, realizing that I am taken care of by the universe. I am taken care of by God. I might be going through a difficult moment. I might be going through a lot of change and transformation, because this feminine journey is one of change and transformation, but God's got me, right? And I know that on the other side of this, because that's that internal strength that we're talking about. That's when that internal strength really started coming out, and that muscle of the internal strength started getting worked. I knew I was going to get what I wanted on the other side. I knew that I had to walk through that portal where I was leaving my old life behind. So I'm just pointing that out because some of you may go through that, right? It doesn't have to be as dramatic as it was for me, but it could be. So I just wanted to put that warning out there. And if you don't have someone guiding you through this, and it's very easy for most people to not realize what's going on, run back to their old life and never get what they want. So that's why I was bringing that up. So that was number one. I had to pump the brakes. Number two, right, when I did pump the brakes, I had to learn to work differently. So I was used to working all the time, right? I was used to always putting out the fires, always being available. I mean, I was at a point where I was basically supporting a bunch of people around me just on the work that I was doing, but I wasn't receiving that much for it, which a lot of you might be in that position as well. Just FYI, just gonna drop that right there. And that was all a bunch of self-worth and worthiness stuff that was running the show with all of that. So one of the things that I had to learn how to do, because I didn't stop working altogether, but I did take a break. Well, I did stop working altogether when it was like really in the depths of it, but then I started coming back to it. I had to learn to work smarter, right? So I started doing things that were more leveraged, like YouTube or referral partners, meaning I would partner up with businesses that were sending business to me, and I took a bunch of those meetings to meet referral partners, and that's actually how I ended up meeting my husband, was through a networking group for one of those. So in finding the solution to take a step back from work and then working smarter, I started meeting people, and then one of those people ended up being my husband, right? So that was like a two-parter in terms of work. The next thing I had to learn is I had to get really good at receiving. Really, really good. Most women are not very good at this at all. Most women receive a compliment, and someone tells us it's a cute dress, and you're like, oh, this whole thing, like I got it at the secondhand place or whatever. It didn't cost that much. That's what most women do. Most women think a men paid for a meal or a date, and then they owe them something, and then they go sleep with them. You don't owe him anything. Learn how to receive. That's what you owe him. What you owe him is the receiving of it, not necessarily giving something in return. Men and masculine men love to give, and they love to give to people who receive it very well. So receiving is important. I did an experiment where I was like, okay, I'm going to learn to receive from the men all around me, right? So if a colleague wants to take me out to dinner, cool. I remember a colleague took me out to dinner and we went to a French place, and I was having like a problem in my business, and he solved it for me at the dinner, and then he's like, order what you want off the menu. It's on me. So I received it. Other things that I did was, like, if my dad or my brother wanted to solve a problem for me, I would let them do it. I started talking to them in a different way. And then in addition to that, if I had male friends who wanted to solve a problem for me, I would let them do it. If men wanted to gift me something, I would let them do it. I was just open to all of it, all around me. And about after 4 months of that, I would end up meeting my husband. Right? And that was me learning how to receive, because I had been overgiving for so long. And most women are in a position where they've been overgiving for so long, and then what's left for them is crumbs. And that's where I was. So I had to really learn how to bring the pendulum back into balance. Now, I may have swung too far in some occasions, but I needed it in order to really balance out those energies. The other thing that I did, and I had actually spent years doing this on the side because this topic kind of fascinated me in a lot of ways, is I learned how men work and their psychology and how to inspire them and how to talk to them. And I'm not perfect at it, still screw up every once in a while, we're all human and that's okay. But I really learned how these things work and how feminine energy can really influence the men around you. And a lot of women don't realize just how powerful they are and how much influence they have over men. They think men are out here oppressing them all the time, and it's true, in some places they are. But the men who do that is because they know how powerful you actually are. And the power doesn't come from might and being strong on the outside. It comes from your feminine energy. By the way, smart men also know that, but they will cherish you, and they will make sure that you are taken care of, because they know that their lives are about to get a whole lot better because you are around. So that's how I started balancing my masculine and feminine energies in my life. I will add a bonus one, and the bonus one is that I really did some deep work about my subconscious, my ancestry, really pulling the stories apart, because it all just started coming up all at the same time once I took a break from work. And more so than just taking a break from work, maybe what I want to say better is just give yourself space to reflect and work through stuff, because I think what's going on for a lot of people in the West in general, not just women, you're so overworked and you're so busy and you're so overscheduled that you don't have any time for self-reflection or personal development or inner work, or to work through any of these things. For me, I had to take a break from work in order to do that. For you, you may not have to, but at least carve something out to start working through these things, because the reality is, we're talking about relationships in this case, our subconscious is the one actually running the show. Until we start becoming aware of what's running the show, it's going to wreak havoc on all our lives. Now, are you ever going to get to a place where you're like absolutely perfect, figure out every single little detail, are perfectly healed, got rid of every block? No, and anybody who tells you that is lying to you. This is a lifelong journey and a lifelong process, and believe me, it doesn't end just because you get married. It continues. It just continues in different ways. But, you know, it is important to understand your own psychology and your beliefs and where they come from and what your triggers are and what sets off the trigger, and learning to change the behavior, because that is what makes all the difference. And if you apply that to relationships, it will turn them completely around. If you take that kind of self-responsibility, and if you apply it to other areas of your life, it will also completely turn it all around. So I hope you guys found this to be helpful. I hope it gave you a lot of clarity. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we have coming out on this channel. We're doing about like twice a week right now. It's kind of like the flow and the rhythm that we got. We'll see how I feel. moving forward. And if you would like to work with me in any capacity, you can find the information for that below. You can also find ways to send inquiries in case there's something where it's like, oh, okay, I need to send Amanda an email, for example. You can find that below as well. Thank you so much for giving me your time today, and I will catch you on the next one.